if you are in this state of conflict and need to get out of it, and a gang member, gang leader is such a good example because that just seems really hard to get out of that situation. What are some tips that apply that you learned from Curtis that can apply to anyone really that's in a tough situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, Curtis tells his story so powerfully. And actually, one of the things I'm most excited about with the book, just as a side note, with the audiobook, we were able to include some excerpts of the actual people talking for themselves instead of my voice.
Oh, that's great.
So Curtis is in there. He's got a great voice, and he tells his story really well. But yeah, Curtis joined his first gang at the age of 9 on the south side of Chicago. He got into high conflict for the same reason a lot of us do, you know, trying to belong, trying to make sense of the world, trying to get a sense of control where you have none. And he rose through the ranks of his particular organization, becoming a leader at a very young age. And along the way, one of his childhood heroes, a basketball star in Chicago, was murdered in high school. And the person who did the shooting was a member of a rival gang, the Gangster Disciples. And in Curtis's mind, this really kind of sealed the high conflict, right? It became a vendetta with this rival organization that lasted for years. It was a very painful experience for all of Chicago to lose this young man in such a violent way. He was a basketball star and had a huge future ahead of him. But the way that Curtis made sense of that, which was impossible to make sense of because it doesn't make sense, is to look at it through this us versus them lens, right? Anyway, many things happened, and eventually he ends up meeting the person who killed his childhood hero, and they now work together. But if you talk to Curtis now about what drove him, how he got out of high conflict, and how he helps other people out of high conflict today, because he works with an organization called Chicago Cred, helping young men and women get out of high conflict more quickly than he did, is he talks a lot about conflict entrepreneurs, actually, because he was one, you know? I mean, he was a conflict entrepreneur.
Right.
And he talks really powerfully about what motivated him, because part of what we have to understand, right, is what is motivating conflict entrepreneurs. And one of the things that motivated him, he now realizes, was his own internal conflict. He had witnessed so much violence, especially against his mother, from abusive partners, that he had never been able to deal with, that internal conflict tends to spill out, right? It becomes an external conflict. And so it wasn't until he was able and willing to access trauma counseling that he could deal with some of, like, recognize what was happening internally and therefore extract himself from some of the other conflicts that he didn't want to be in anymore. And what he tells young men today is, look, until you deal with that internal conflict, this external conflict is going to keep happening. So the inner fight and the outer fight are really connected in ways that we don't often talk about.
Is some of that too just hope? Like, meaning you can want to change, but maybe you don't see a clear path to change.
Totally. I mean, I often think about, you know, I wonder how many people there are who would like to get out of high conflict, whether it's gang conflict or other things. And I think it's millions of people. I mean, if you talk to people who are in gang conflict in Chicago today, it is miserable. Like, they want out. And interestingly, I had a chance to talk with a bipartisan group of members of Congress a couple weeks ago, and they sound the same. Like, they're miserable. They want out. Yeah. They hate it. And they're stuck, right? They're stuck in high conflict. So yeah, often there's a sense that you have no options, or that there's only two options and they're both terrible. So that's another red flag to look for. Whenever you feel in life like there's only two options and they're both terrible, you're probably missing something. And that's the way that high conflict kind of narrows our vision, right? And it's important to find ways to get that peripheral vision back.